Okay, in part one, you've seen where I had removed primer pockets. I'd already done that. I had used the spray lube and resized a bunch of cases. I done by hand the case length trim, the primer pocket cleaning, and the chamfering of the case mouth and neck. And now I'm doing another almost 60 cases. And the thing I wanted to show, I've already lubed these up, but what I wanted to show was, here's a case, looks good until you get to, see if I can find it. This thing had a real heavy crimp on it, right there. Hopefully you can see that. That is a crack in the case neck. This case is not usable. So this one will get tossed into the brass bucket that I take to recycling. Yes, they pay for brass. It takes a while to get accumulate a lot, but right there is a crack. I don't think it's going to focus very well in that case neck. That's something you got to watch when you're doing these cases. Now this one hasn't been sized yet, but you got to check the case neck and shoulder. And you also got to check down here at the base to make sure you don't see any cracks. Because if you do and you load it, you're asking for trouble. If I'd load this case and got a bullet in it, then fired it, that would go ahead and split on open, and you would have problems. So that case is no longer any good. So when you're reloading, that's one of the things you got to do. You got to visually inspect each case and look for fine things like that. I could feel it with my thumbnail, and then I got a magnifying glass to just check, and it goes all the way down into the shoulder. So that case is trash. In fact, what I'm going to do right now, just so I don't pick it up, I'm going to put it in the vise, since I don't have a pair of pliers here handy. And I'm going to squeeze it so I know that this case is no good. I may have to do this with both hands, I don't know, but yeah. I can't get that to, might be able to do it that way. But yeah, you don't want to use that case. So I want to deform it. There we go, I'm smashing it now. That way I don't pick that thing up by accident and load it. In fact, look where that crack was. You can even see it better now. And there was another one, apparently. So glad I found that. But that is a safety tip. If you haven't gotten into reloading, you're thinking about getting into reloading, this is a dangerous hobby, and you need to visually inspect each case that you're going to use, and especially if you've picked up range brass from somewhere, because it could have been reloaded brass, somebody else shot and decided to leave it lay. So let me keep getting these sized. I'm going to check the case mouth on each one of them and make sure I don't have any others. Okay, I went back and visually checked each one of those, and I used a magnifying glass and held them under the light to check and make sure. Now some of that brass you can tell is darker It's some older brass. That was probably the reloads. So that might be second or third time. I don't know. It's Winchester brass. But that one was cracked. I haven't found any others yet. But like here, you can see this is kind of an old piece. But then I've got some newer brass. So that old dark colored brass has been loaded for quite some time. That's what we shot this past Saturday. And that was reloads. So it could be that that case was, it's hard to tell how many times that might have been reloaded. Now usually you can get probably about 5-6 times out of your case, as long as you're not loading it to max charge, and I do not load to max charge. I do not have an annealer, but the case mouth and neck, after so many times of reloading, start to get brittle, going up and down the press after being fired and then being resized, being fired and being resized. And if you anneal the neck and the shoulder, that'll soften the brass back up, and you hopefully won't end up with a crack, and will extend the life of your brass. But I just wanted to let you know that the other ones I did in the first video, those were all brand new, one-time shot. They were those PMCs. They were brand new factory rounds, shot one time. This will be their first reloading. After I shot up the reloads Saturday, I saved that brass. But like I said, some of that may have been range brass that I picked up and reloaded. I don't know. But that is one thing when you're reloading that you got to make sure you do, is always check for cracks in the case mouth and neck or shoulder, and at the base. Those are the two places that will really give you problems if there's a failure. So just remember that. If you're not into reloading and you're talking about getting into reloading, you've got to examine your brass carefully. So I'm going to get back to sizing these, and I'll check these each as I size them. But those right there are all good. So I've only had one, this one right here, which I've already smashed, that wasn't any good. And I'm glad I found that. So just stay with us. Okay, after visually checking some cases, I only had two, and you can see I've smashed them. This was the first one that I found, and then here's the second one. Now, I'm working up some Hornady brass for the 308, and what I wanted to show you, I've got a gauge here. I'll get over here. This is the gauge. This is a Lyman 308, basically Headspace gauge. And basically, if you can see, there are two levels to this. You got this level and you got a lower level. And what this does, and I'm going to take, this is a fired Hornady, once fired Hornady brass. It's been tumbled, it's been cleaned. You leave this on a flat surface. Now watch what happens here. Let me zoom in just a little bit. Watch what happens here. Drop that in as far as it goes. Now the inside of this gauge is sort of like your chamber. So what's happening here is, when you fire, you see the shoulder, this case expands, and it expands to your chamber. Okay, but you have certain tolerances that you have to meet whenever you're loading around into your chamber. And since this was fire formed to a chamber, not mine, so what this does, it tells you this is set to what you'd call Sammy specs, and you want it on a flat surface. You pop the case in, like I said, and it won't go in. Now, I can push it, but that, you know, basically you can see right there, that wouldn't go into my rifle or any other 308 rifle, other than maybe the one it was fired in. But now the thing is, it still has to be resized even for that rifle, because you got to have a little bit of clearance between this shoulder. No, I'm trying to keep it in frame. Between this shoulder and your chamber. That's what they call the headspace. It's got to expand a little bit. If this thing's tied up, there's no expansion there, and there's where you get high pressures. Also, your bolt won't even close if this is all the way up against. I mean, I could put this in my rifle right now, and my bolt would not close. Okay, but once you resize them, I'm gonna do one right here. And I'm just gonna resize it. I'm not lubing it, or not trimming it or anything, just resizing it. Okay, you can see here I just resized it. Primer's gone, you can see through the flash hole. Now I need to wipe it off, get that lube off of it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stick it in here, and you watch what happens. See how flush that is? I mean, across the top is flat. Now it is, you can just barely see it. You can see there's a cutout spot through here. Now if it goes flush with that, well, it could be flush. It's flush across the top here, but you can go back too far on your shoulder. Now if you look at the bottom, this tells you whether it needs to be trimmed or not. And if you can see, and I don't know if you can really see it, it's just a hair. Now down in there is fine. The gap between here and this lower part is the acceptable range. Now the thing is, with this case down in here, get it back out. When you flip this thing upside down, it should fall right out. Like I said, that's just the Lyman 308 headspace gauge. So there, I know this round is fine. And I've checked all the others I had. I didn't have a 308. I've got a 30-06 300 blackout, and I've got them for 9mm, and they're L.E. Wilson gauges. But I didn't have one for 308, so I finally got this. But I'd been using my rifle to check, you know, the headspace. I'd take the resized case, I'd start it down the chamber, see if the bolt would close. If the bolt closes easily, then it's fine. If the bolt won't close, or I struggle to try to close it, then the headspace, the shoulder hasn't been set back enough. Now, you'll hear a lot of people now in YouTube call it bump, but the shoulder hasn't been set back enough. And like I said, it's SAMI, S-A-A-M-I specs. There's dimensions. And that's pretty much what you're seeing when we get over here to the reloading manual. When you see this, that is basically what those are. Those are dimensions and the angle of the shoulder and everything for a specific caliber. So I've got that done. Still got all this brass to work up. I've already got 180 pieces already hooked up. Here's what I'm using: the nozzler, 150 grain, ballistic tips, and I've got, I think there's 50 in each one of these, so there's 100, and I've got 1, 2, 3 bags of, I think it's 50 in a bag. So there's 150, this would be 250. I'm not gonna load up 250 rounds, but I'll get some loaded up for me and Jared to shoot, and I'm going to set back some boxes once I get those loaded. The first ones I load up will be for me and Jared to shoot, make sure they're fine, the grain's right, the grains of powder, which we already shot loads I'd worked up for my Mossberg, and that grain of powder was fine. They zeroed, shot right where we was aiming, so that's the same load I'm gonna work up. But we'll probably take a box, he'll shoot 10, I'll shoot 10, then if everything's fine, then I'll load up about 60 rounds, 80 rounds for him, 60, 80 rounds for me, and set those back for hunting. And we won't need ammo for a while. So let me continue doing this, and there'll be some more. Stay tuned.